Hey there! Thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and well, happy birthday Ninjago! Over the past few weeks, we've been celebrating Ninjago's 10-year-long anniversary. It started in January 14, 2011, and isn't going anywhere anytime soon. To date, we've taken a look at my ultimate Ninjago collection, featuring every single set, including all the wall-mounted land vehicles and mechs. You can see every single Ninjago minifigure, plus all the buildings and everything hanging in the sky, from dragons to Destiny's bounties. And so we figured we'd wrap things up with part 6, focusing on a top 10 LEGO video. Specifically, the top 10 unused concepts for Ninjago. This could be anything and everything from unused story concepts, to bits and pieces of episodes that never actually made it in the show, to completely scrapped set designs and even some characters. Everything is fair game for this top 10 video, and I hope that you enjoy because there is a ton of stuff to get through.
It was a momentous task whittling down the list of unused Ninjago concepts and ideas down to just 10 top picks, thanks to countless tidbits and concept art shared by Ninjago creators like Tommy Anderson and writers Kevin and Dan Hageman, as well as Bragi Schut. In this list, I've tried to pick out the 10 most interesting and impactful canned ideas that either would have significantly impacted the story, future sets, or even just stuff I would have really liked to see. Of course, this list is far from comprehensive, and just to quickly call out a few that didn't make the list, we aren't even covering the cancelled Master of the Mountain epilogue featuring a statue being built of coal, or the Ninjago Christmas specials, which were supposed to release in 2012 but cut for budgetary concerns. But so, without further ado, let's get straight to the point, starting off with number 10. An in-depth overview of all the character and season concept art for both the toy line and the show. Over its 10-year run, Ninjago has had countless concepts, designs, and preliminary artwork produced during the making of the show and sets. It would have required an entirely separate list to break up all of these into individual listings, so I figured I'd just group them all into number 10 here and let the images speak for themselves. We'll start off with, of course, the pilot season. Besides the first concept sketch that became Ninjago featuring characters named Edward or Ren, there were a ton of concept sketches that were very recently revealed for Ninjago's 10th anniversary, hinting at radically different places the show could have gone. Tidbits of information like Garmadon's original name being Demic and a completely different appearance of some of the villain factions are just some of the many pieces of concepts revealed for this era. Even sketches for Season 2's villain faction, the Stone Samurai Army, date back to as early as 2010. It's fascinating to see the many concept explorations even going into Seasons 3 and 4. And for Season 5, we got a massive array of concepts and prototypes thanks to the Ghosts and Possessed Lloyd concepts being shown off at Comic-Con. There's even a cancelled Skybound concept that was recently shown off featuring the ninjas' souls being sucked directly out of their bodies, leaving behind a soulless husk, which would have been a very interesting concept for the season. Moving on to Seasons 8 and 9 for the 2019 San Diego Comic-Con presentation, LEGO revealed some concept artwork of what could have been, featuring different takes on the dragon hunters ranging from prehistoric to post-apocalyptic, and even some fantastical and unique dragon designs. There's so much to see here, and honestly I would have loved to see some of these as sets, particularly as the dragon sets we did get ranged from just alright to decently good, especially by Ninjago standards. Even as we move forward to the modern era of Ninjago, there's still a wealth of concept art from these eras, featuring the Elemental Masters and Ronin playing a key role in Season 11, an ice faction not led by a corrupted Zane, completely different designs and collectibles for Season 13, and even some sketches for Prime Empire. Honestly, there's so much here and I could keep going on about some of my favorite concept sketches, but the reason why I've placed all of these to collectively make up the last point is that there's simply too much, and many of them are just iterations on what we actually eventually got. Unlike many of the other points featured on this list, which are actually radical changes and alterations to the entire Ninjago storyline. Moving on to number 9, we have a wealth of scrapped Elemental Master concepts, plus an in-depth backstory for Camille that never made it into the show. In the early concept phase for Season 4, Tournament of Elements, Ninjago creator Tommy Anderson came up with dozens of sketches for Elemental Masters that either radically differed from what we got, or conceptualized characters we never once saw in the show. For instance, Jacob Hefsner, Master of Sound, was originally conceived with a completely different design, but after Tommy was inspired by 1970s funk musician Bootsy Collins, the character took on a completely different look. While some elemental masters like Karloff and Griffin Turner vaguely resemble their on-screen counterparts, characters like Gravis, Master of Gravity, Paleman, Master of Light, and Skylar, Master of Amber are quite different, and there's even quite a few characters that never made it on screen, like Magno, Master of Magnetism, who presumably was scrapped because it was too close to Karloff, Master of Metal, and a Master of Time who was considered too powerful for that particular story and was later used as the main villain concept for Season 7, Hands of Time. The final tidbit of info regarding Season 4 was a fascinating piece of conceptual backstory for Camille, the elemental master of form. In the show, we learned basically next to nothing about Camille. Only her name, powers, and pretty malicious personality were on display. However, as Tommy Anderson revealed on Twitter, there was a much deeper and compelling backstory in place that was not necessarily ever supposed to be revealed in the show, but at least was used as a guideline when writing her character. Major highlights include a manipulative mother abusing her powers, a potential mysterious father continually following her and stalking her across Ninjago, and even a kind of funny bit of her impersonating Dareth to take over his Mojo Dojo until her mother wisely realized that there was, quote, limited value in that establishment. All in all, there were a ton of fascinating Season 4 concepts, and while I would have loved to see some of these in the show, like a Master of Magnetism or Camille's deeper backstory, others I'm glad they scrapped or saved for later, like the Master of Time concept. Speaking of the Masters of Time, there was a point in time where Ninjago was supposed to end at Season 7, and potentially continue along with the movie continuity. That brings us to point 8, Ninjago's planned ending at Season 7. Tommy A shared a screenshot of a very interesting email on Twitter that outlines exactly what he had in mind should Ninjago have had to have ended in Season 7. In short, the finale and most of the season of Season 7 would have generally played out the same, except it would have ended with Crux Necronics attempting to travel 200 years into the future, with their plan being that after the ninja are long dead, they could easily take over Ninjago themselves. However, as they emerge in the future, they discover that Kai tampered with the Iron Doom to slow their progress, forcing them to emerge only 40 years in the future. In this timeline, the ninja all of their designs from the future flash-forward scene in possession, and have built so-called Cryptarium Prison 2.0 on top of the very spot they expected Iron Doom to return. Given 40 years to prepare, the ninja are more than ready for this fight, and summon invisible ninjoids to retrieve the Time Blades and lock Crux Necronics behind a force field. In a tantalizing hint that would never have been revealed, all of the ninja arrive and some even have kids, except for Cole, who is nowhere to be found. Is he dead or off somewhere just eating cake? That would have been up for the viewers to decide. Now, this is quite the radical change to what actually happened, but for me personally, I am so glad it didn't end on the very disappointing Season 7. Seasons 8 and 9 are some of the best Ninjagos done, and I can't imagine still being a major hardcore fan of the show without them. Maybe if Season 7 was a little bit better or higher quality, I would have been okay with it ending like this, but it definitely would have felt incredibly abrupt and jarring to end the entire show on that note. That being said, I'm not entirely opposed to the Time Twins returning at some point, and I'm sure they have something in the cards down the line. And on the topic of the Hands of Time, the flashback scenes of that season introduced the ancient Elemental Master of Lightning, Jay's real mother, named Libby Gordon after Tommy Andreessen's wife behind the scenes, but never actually officially named in the show. That brings us to point 7, the link to Libby Gordon's involvement in the Prime Empire game. Season 12 Prime Empire aired just last year, and despite being a so-called focus season for Jay, honestly didn't give him too much significant development and really didn't affect the lore and story of Ninjago as a whole. This plot point, however, would have changed everything. Tommy A revealed on Twitter that the original concept behind Prime Empire would have featured the game still being made by Milton Dyer, but the source behind its mysterious energy and electronic abilities being Jay's real mother, Libby Gordon, and her elemental lightning energy. What her motivation would have been behind powering Prime Empire, or whether or not she was even willing to power it or in control, is completely unknown, but it certainly makes for a much more interesting concept and a crazy twist on a personal link to Jay as a focus character. His last focus season, Skybound, revealed he was adopted, and they could have taken the chance for this season to focus on his real parents, who we still don't know much about despite their multiple appearances in the show. Unfortunately, Tommy has stated that on many times, they try to avoid making the story reliant on deep references of old lore, simply because new fans would be confused. This seems to be a lesson they learned from Bionicle, which got way too convoluted and difficult for new fans to join the theme in later years. Many of the concepts on this list were scrapped because they reference older elements of the show too much, which in my opinion is a huge shame, as removing stuff like this prevents Ninjago from truly being able to build on pre-established lore. And unlike Point 8, this is a change that I would have really loved to see and welcomed in the show, which is why it's a bit higher on this list. But moving on to number 6, we have the cancelled Amber Legacy comic trilogy series, which was drafted, planned, and promptly cancelled after the quote-unquote poor distribution of the first original show canon comic trilogy, Dark Island. For those who aren't aware, the Dark Island trilogy was a comic book series conceptualized as taking place between Skybound and Day of the Departed, and not only explained some minor stuff like where the ninja got their newest vehicles and provided some closure to the Sky Pirate storyline, but also featured the return of Klaus and the conclusion of his story arc, which was pretty much left hanging open in the TV show. Spoiler alert, Klaus was sent to the underworld, and the last we saw of him was facing off against a group of Skulkin in that realm. Dark Island was an incredibly unique story and was even referenced in the TV show itself in the form of a full mural on the side of the Monastery of Spinjitzu and the intro to March of the Oni. Alas, it was near impossible to obtain some of the later volumes, with the issue selling out almost immediately after hitting Amazon and being extremely hard to find in stores. I'm not exactly what behind the scenes reason led to this going wrong, but the biggest consequence from that financial underperformance was the cancellation of the next original comic series, Amber Legacy. All we know about it is that it would have explored the origins of the Amber Power and Skylar's family history. Chen of course mentions Elemental Power skipping his generation in Season 4, but beyond that we know literally nothing about the past Elemental Masters of Amber. According to Tommy, this comic series would not only have explored that past, but also fleshed out Skylar's mother as well, and how willing she was to play a part in Chen's schemes. All in all, this is a fascinating story that I wish we got a chance to see in Ninjago, and it's such a shame this was cancelled. That being said, I still remain hopeful that this information will be revealed someday, which is why Tommy is keeping this backstory very close to his chest and isn't revealing anything as of yet. Moving on to number 5, we can take a look at one of the more well-known cancelled concepts for the show. That is, Mr. E actually being Echo Zane rebuilt and reprogrammed. In Season 8, Sons of Garmadon, a mysterious character literally named Mr. E, get it, appeared on the scene. Originally believed to be the leader of the gang, it was revealed that he was merely a pawn of Harumi, and yet the mystery behind Mr. E's identity still remained. Going into the season, the prevailing theory was that it was Mr. Echo Zane, and all clues pointed towards it. He was revealed to be a ninjoid, had a specific rivalry with Zane, and could match him 1-for-1 in a fight. This idea got so far into development that it was actually temp animated. Zane voice actor Brent Miller has even shared these animatics on his channel. Tommy A appeared on his channel going into some detail as to where this was supposed to go, with the original ending of the Snake Jaguar episode with the big reveal, and Deadman Squall kicking off with a passionate argument between them. Alas, this concept was yet another victim to both the attempt to simplify Ninjago's story and prevent too many crucial story plot points being reliant on past events. Writers of the show weren't sure if many viewers would even remember Echo Zane's limited appearance in Season 6, Skybound, and even beyond that, the finale to Skybound erased the events of that season, meaning that Zane in particular wouldn't even remember Echo Zane or who he was. After it was decided that it would have taken too much clunky exposition, dialogue, and screen time to explain not only to viewers but to Zane himself as a character who this person was, the idea was scrapped and Mr. E ended up just being a random robot built to aid Harumi, which is a bit of a shame. That being said, I totally understand why they made this change, because explaining all that backstory in a season largely unrelated to Skybound would have felt really bloated and out of place in a season already chock full of crazy ideas and concepts, so I definitely understand that being shelved. But since we're on the topic of Season 8, I might as well mention one other thing that was indeed scrapped, although it would have radically changed specifically events in Season 9. During a recent interview with the TTV podcast, Tommy Anderson revealed that writers Kevin and Dan Hageman were heavily inspired by the popular TV show Attack on Titan, and tried to work in as many influences from that show as they could into Ninjago. One of these influences was transforming the Oni into massive humanoid creatures with the heads of bulls that would rampage through the town, almost similar to the grotesque and misshapen titans who rampage through the towns in that one show. Unfortunately, the LEGO Group did not want to go in this direction and instead asked the writers to include more of a Stone Titan vibe versus one that was actually organic and muscular, potentially due to the fact that it would make an easier set to build. As you can see, the Oni Titan being completely stone is relatively simple to build as a set as a completely gray and stone warrior versus something that would have required a lot more musculature and detailing, almost similar to the Bull Demon from Monkey King. They also probably did not want to draw too many similarities to Attack on Titan, which is very violent and very not like Ninjago, so they probably wanted to change it up because of that. Although it is really nice to speculate what could have been in that regard, especially because that's actually one of my favorite shows, one of the best written shows I've seen, and I would have loved to see any sort of reference to Attack on Titan in Ninjago. You can actually still see some remnants of this plotline when you look at certain episodes of Season 8. The way they depict the Oni is completely different from how the Oni appeared in the show. Instead of what we got, which was just one single colossal Oni Titan rampaging through the city in Season 9, the original draft for that season would have featured 3 separate Oni Titans, which looked a lot more organic and a lot more like the Titans from Attack on Titan. You can even see the remnant of this still being in the plotline in this episode of Season 8, where Lloyd and Harumi pass by a mural depicting the Oni, and there's one specific image detailing a man being chased by 3 towering titans. Unfortunately, for both set reasons and feasibility reasons, this was changed to just one Titan, and we eventually got what we got in the show, which was the very stone-like Titan and not anything like an organic being. But speaking of shelved concepts that would have radically changed the show, number 4's point is likely the most extreme so far: the original ending to the pilot season. Back in 2011's original run, you'll notice that none of the ninja use vehicles, and this was intentional. To LEGO, it didn't make sense that a traditional ninja would use modern technology like cars, motorcycles, or jets. Of course, gliders, weapons, and dragons were the strict limit. However, it soon became clear that they did want to focus on some sort of vehicles for the toy line, so the question became how exactly to integrate them in the story. Well, according to this unused concept from the pilots shared again by, you guessed it, Tommy A, the ninja would have jumped through the portal to return to Ninjago from the underworld, only to find that they traveled through time and emerged in a far future version of Ninjago City. If this image feels familiar, it's because it was used to inspire Ninjago Rebooted and New Ninjago City in 2014, so it probably would have looked pretty close to what we actually got. Having the ninja travel through time and into the far future after just a pilot season that was for all intents and purposes set in relatively olden times would have probably been too jarring a contrast for the theme, which is why it was scrapped. But I personally would have been fascinated to see what Ninjago would look like today if they actually followed up on this idea. Of course, I'm pretty happy with what we got, but it is still fun to speculate on what could have been. And this is the biggest, craziest, most radical departure of them all so far. I just mentioned Ninjago's 3rd season, Rebooted, which brings us to our 3rd point: the original concepts for Rebooted and the follow-up storyline being set in space. Rebooted's development was fraught with last-minute changes, rewrites, and a constantly fluctuating budget and episode count, due to Ninjago's planned cancellation and replacement with Legends of Chima in 2013, and the last-minute resurrection after fan outcry and response. As such, Rebooted was planned as a 13-episode season, later on cut down to 4 episodes, and then extended to 6 and then 8, which explains a lot about the extremely fast pace of the first 2 episodes, much slower pace of the next 2, and relatively standard pace of the rest. The Hageman brothers, writers for the show for most of its run, have stated that some of the concepts in Rebooted, like Evil Tech Wu, were forced to be drastically cut short and reduced from the 13-episode count down to 4 and then 8. This is very much felt in the show, which features Wu turned evil early on, and reverting back without much fanfare in a few episodes after honestly not doing much in terms of furthering the story and any one character's development. I would have loved to see more of the evil Wu concept, which was stated to be the writer's greatest regret, wasting that opportunity. But even beyond evil Wu, tons and tons of concepts were drafted for Rebooted, the most impactful and tantalizing of which being that Season 4, which of course became Tournament of Elements, was originally supposed to focus around a completely different concept: the ninja in space. The rebooted episode set in space, and the entire Project Arcturus idea was intended to be a lead-in to the next season, where the groundwork would have been set to have the ninja venture to the far reaches of space. This concept was even explored in the semi-canon comics by Bionicle scribe Greg Farshty, which featured the ninja facing off against a shape-shifting malicious alien presence on the comet who had wiped out an entire alien civilization once thriving in space. Unfortunately, Ninjago creator Tommy Andresen has been very verbally and publicly been strongly against a season of Ninjago set in space to avoid overlap with another of his favorite IPs, Star Wars. It's very unlikely that he did play a role in convincing the Hageman brothers to produce other, more relatively grounded ideas for Season 4. While I'm very pleased with Tournament of Elements and love the expansion it represented to the lore, part of me is still holding out hope that the whole space concept will be revisited at least some point in the future, maybe as a chance to sneak in some classic LEGO space sub-themes, or even just a legacy set focusing on the Ninjroid spaceship would be really amazing. But then we can move on to number 2. We have some fascinating concepts surrounding one of the most controversial aspects of Ninjago, the LEGO Ninjago movie. Delayed multiple times and constantly in flux, the Ninjago movie was a disappointment to many fans of the show and significantly underperformed at the box office, and played a part in contributing to the downfall of the LEGO cinematic universe as a whole. For fans who did not see the Ninjago movie, it was a completely divergent storyline from the show that focused on the ninja in high school facing off against a very humorous and sarcastic Garmadon and focusing on Lloyd trying to bond with his father as they eventually battled a monstrous, human-scale cat known as Meowthra. This premise is pretty wild and very out there, and honestly not executed very well. Watching the Ninjago movie was a baffling experience. Frenetic pacing, poorly fleshed out characters were the least of its problems, and the movie was so rushed and cut that scenes literally reappear 3 or 4 times in identical fashions with identical animation except with different dialogue, simply because they had to throw together the movie from what clips they had. I'm not even kidding with this. This shot of Zane is used 3 separate times with different dialogue. The Ninjago movie is a bit of a mess, and what's most interesting about it is the completely separate storyline proposed and even animated for the movie. In the Making of Ninjago movie book, significant details are revealed about the original concept of the movie, which focused on time travel and the ninja traveling from the future to the past to prevent Garmadon from turning evil, and in turn defeating the Vermilion and the Great Devourer alongside a younger version of Wu and Garmadon. Of course, many of these ideas were actually recycled into Season 7, Hands of Time, which focused on the Vermilion, albeit with much less budget-intensive and crazy designs like these, and time travel. What's so bizarre about this idea is that it got incredibly far in development, so much so that an entire scene was fully animated and released online, featuring a conversation between Lloyd and a young Garmadon unaware of the identity of his future son. Further storyboards reveal even more significant development for Jay and Nia as a couple, who get swallowed by the Devourer and discover an entire realm inside of its belly, comprising of past people and cultures it devoured in the past, almost akin to the preeminent concept from Season 5. Tons and tons of designs were developed for this storyline, and specifically for young Wu and Garmadon, some of which are only being reused in the mainline TV show today. And the finale would have even featured the ninja creating a giant robot mongoose to battle the Great Devourer. Why a mongoose? Well, in the real world they are allegedly really good at killing snakes, although I suspect this reference would have gone over a lot of people's heads. I even had to look this one up myself. To be honest, I would have been over the moon to see this idea come to fruition, and it would have allowed LEGO to have their cake and eat it too. Want to focus on mechs and vehicles for the sets? They still could have opened the movie with a massive battle against Garmadon and potentially even up the stakes by having the city be devastated and a ninja forced to go back in time and prevent his evil transformation. Much like in the actual movie where the vehicles were discarded and destroyed very early on, they could have just featured in an opening sequence before the ninja were sent back in time, allowing the rest of the sets to focus on a more ancient aesthetic and rural design. There's so much more I could say about these concepts that I haven't even managed to fit in this one video, and I'd highly recommend you to check out the Making of Ninjago movie book if you can find it, as it offers a very in-depth look at what could have been with this movie. But finally, the number 1 point on this list is a major one, and it actually involves 2 semi-related points that share this pick: the planned Ninjago spin-offs that never came to fruition, and the scrapped major visual changes to the ninja. Ninjago is constantly trying to reinvent itself and make the series fresh for new viewers, and around the 2016 era of Ninjago, there was significant development put into making the designs and concepts for the show entirely new. It of course started in 2015, with Cole transforming into a ghost, which was intended to be permanent, and would have continued in Skybound, where Jay was set to retain his eye patch, potentially permanently losing an eye, and gain a steampunk pirate aesthetic in future seasons. Writers Kevin and Dan have even outlined a cancelled idea to transform Kai into some sort of magma monster, with glowing cracks outlining his skin and a much more elemental and animalistic vibe. Of course, this was all scrapped with the advent of the Ninjago movie, which did its own fair share of reinventing the look and feel of the ninja without making changes as drastic as these. But the next attempt at reinvention was even more drastic than this and involves a number of planned, but scrapped, spin-off ideas. Back around 2017, where Ninjago was near peak popularity, writers Kevin and Dan asked fans on Twitter how they'd feel about a Ninjago spin-off, likely to gauge interest and strengthen a pitch to LEGO. During this time, they commented on a fan drawing of a concept focused on the ninja's children and the next generation of ninja, stating that it was very similar to one of their very own spin-off ideas pitched to LEGO. After 2017 and a ton of initial speculation and excitement, there was unfortunately no news on a spin-off for the next 3 years. It wasn't until February of last year, 2020, that they explained the full story. Essentially, the Hageman brothers had pitched a female-led Ninjago spin-off, featuring Skylar as the main character, Pixel as a supporting character, and likely Misako as well. The show would have also taken the chance to explore some side characters like Ronin and Cyrus Borg. They were willing and able and ready to write and create the spin-off, but according to them, LEGO wasn't so sold, and decided not to move forward with the idea. For me personally, I'm 50-50 on a Ninjago spin-off. I obviously would love to see certain characters be further developed outside of the main show, but I'm not quite sure this would have worked out set-wise, and I can see why LEGO wasn't entirely convinced. Dedicating resources to a second TV show as big as Ninjago would require almost 2 concurrent set lines, essentially splitting Ninjago into 2 completely different, concurrently running themes. Logistically, it would have been a difficult task to handle both themes at the same time, and I feel like this would have eaten up a lot of LEGO's space and development time and potentially prevented us from getting more unique and completely different original action and adventure themes, like Hidden Side and Monkey Kid, especially given that nowadays we get so few of these in the first place. That being said, I would still love to see the Ninjago concept expanded, and purely from a TV show perspective and setting aside logistics, I personally would be thrilled to experience a Ninjago spin-off show to break up the repetitiveness and relative monotony of the same 6 characters every season. But with that, we have summed up all 10 major concepts, cancelled ideas, and planned tidbits, ranging from minor character appearances and detail changes to completely different directions that would have significantly impacted the story. But what do you think? Which concepts do you wish we saw, and which are you happy we didn't get? Are there any spin-offs you'd like to see, or maybe some character or story direction concepts you'd want to be developed in the future? Let me know down in the comments below, and as usual, thank you so much for tuning into Duckbricks. Stay tuned for more LEGO and Ninjago news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. This episode wraps up our 6-part series celebrating Ninjago's 10-year anniversary, but don't let that stop you from celebrating because there is a ton more to cover, and don't worry because we still have a ton of Ninjago videos planned in the future. Thank you so much, and bye bye for now.